There's a name for the shame that comes with this, though most people don't know it yet. It's the quiet grief of a mind that was never designed to be one thing, and no one told you. This is one of those quiet crises that hides in plain sight, and you don't call it a crisis because it doesn't look like one from the outside. You have interests, you have skills, you show up. You show up to your job and your friendships and your Sunday mornings, and everything looks fine. But underneath, there's this low hum of feeling behind. Everyone else seems to have chosen. Everyone else seems to know. And here's the thing. If you don't learn to read this pattern in yourself, you'll spend the next decade trying to shrink your mind to fit a room that was never built for it. What you're about to see is a map. 7 signs. Then, something no one tells you about why you were born this way. Psychologists have a name for what you are, though most people never hear it in school or from their family. It's called multipotentiality. The word sounds clinical, but the mechanism behind it is one of the most fascinating patterns. One of the most fascinating patterns in human cognition, and it's been quietly studied for decades. Your brain, specifically the interplay between your prefrontal cortex and your dopamine reward system, is calibrated toward novelty. It rewards new information more intensely than it rewards routine, and this changes how you experience everything. Researchers who study divergent thinking have found that certain minds don't just tolerate ambiguity, they need it to function properly. Your working memory holds more open loops at once. Your associative networks fire wider than most people's do. You see connections between fields that most people experience as completely unrelated, and this is not accidental. Depth in one thing costs you the wideness of everything else, and your brain has quietly refused that trade for years. The result is a person who looks scattered from the outside and feels weirdly whole on the inside. The first sign is that you begin every new interest with something that feels almost electric, almost alive, and then you grieve, quietly, when the electricity fades. You pick up a language, and for 6 weeks you're inhaling it. You buy the notebooks, you tell your friends, you fall asleep thinking in it, and then, one Tuesday, the pull softens. You don't hate the language, you just aren't in love with it anymore. Or maybe love isn't quite the right word. It's closer to a quiet returning, where the newness has finished doing its work inside you. And what nobody tells you is that this transition has a name, a real one, studied by cognitive scientists. It's the end of the exploration phase, where your dopamine system stops firing on novelty and starts asking for depth. Most people call this quitting. You've called yourself worse. This isn't quitting. Not even close to it. This is a completely normal cycle of a novelty-driven mind, and the shame around it is what makes it feel like failure. The second sign is that you collect skills the way other people collect memories, quietly and without a system. Ask you what you can do, and you'll trail off after the third thing because you don't want to sound like you're bragging, or worse, sound like you're lying. You know how to build a basic website. You know a surprising amount about mushroom foraging. You can sight read music. You once got weirdly good at bread. You've had at least 4 small obsessions this year alone, and you carry all of it in this soft, private way, like you don't fully believe any of it actually counts. Here's what's actually happening underneath. Every skill you touch leaves a residue in the way you think and see. Your brain builds a library of patterns, and later, without you noticing, it starts using them to see through new problems. What looks like scattered learning is not scatter at all. It's the slow, patient construction of a very rare tool. The third sign is that you can hold 2 completely unrelated ideas in your mind and feel them start to talk. Start to talk to each other, quietly, in the background, without you even asking them to. You read a book on ant colonies, and 3 days later, you're rethinking how your team communicates at work. You watch a jazz musician improvise, and you suddenly understand something about how to run a difficult conversation. This is called cross-domain pattern recognition, and cognitive scientists consider it one of the highest forms of insight available to humans. It's not intuition. It's your brain running silent comparisons in the background between systems it has no reason to connect. Most people don't have access to this because they've only lived deep in one field their whole lives. You've lived wide across many fields, and the reward is exactly this: a mind that sees the shape underneath the shape. Consider this for a moment. Everything you've heard so far, the interest cycles, the collected skills, the strange sideways insights. These aren't distractions from a real life. They are the actual architecture of one, quietly built over years. Your problem was never that you can't focus. Your problem was that you were taught to measure yourself against a mind that isn't yours, and never was, and never could be, no matter how hard you tried to force it. What looks like scatter from the outside is actually a very specific kind of wide-angle cognition, and it has a name now. And once you can name that, the shame starts to move. It doesn't leave completely, but it starts to loosen. So the real question isn't why you can't stick to one thing. It's what you can build with a mind shaped like yours. The fourth sign is that you feel a low, persistent guilt around rest, and it's been there for as long as you remember. When you sit down to do nothing, your mind starts generating anyway. New ideas, new projects, new versions of yourself. New versions of yourself you haven't tried yet. And instead of feeling free, you feel behind. Always behind. You watch other people relax, and it looks like a foreign language you never learned to speak fluently. Look, this is the hidden cost of a novelty-seeking brain, and nobody warns you about it when you're growing up. The dopamine system that makes exploration feel alive also makes stillness feel like failure, like waste, like something's wrong. It's not that you can't rest. It's that resting doesn't feel like the reward it's supposed to feel like. Learning to sit with the hum without obeying it is one of the quiet skills a wide mind has to build slowly. The fifth sign is that you've learned to edit yourself down to fit into rooms, and you've gotten very good at it. You don't tell your coworkers about the poetry. You don't tell your poetry friends about your obsession with logistics or spreadsheets. You keep parts of yourself in separate drawers, and you open the right drawer for the right person, and you call this social skill. But somewhere in there is a small, tired feeling that you can't quite name, and it shows up when you're alone. It's the feeling of never being seen whole, of never being met by someone who holds all of you at once. There's a moment that keeps coming up when people describe this pattern, almost word for word in different rooms. They say something like, I feel like I'm always translating myself into a version that fits. Psychologists sometimes call this identity fragmentation, and while it doesn't sound serious, over time, it teaches you a quiet lesson. The lesson is that the full shape of who you are is too much for the world. That lesson is not true. But the loneliness it creates is very real, and it takes years to unlearn once you've believed it. The sixth sign is the one that hurts, because it looks like ambition, and it feels like the right thing to do. You believe that if you were just better at one thing, you'd finally feel whole and settled and legitimate. So you double down. You force focus. You try to become the specialist you were told to be by teachers and family. And every time you get close, some part of you rebels. And you don't understand why it keeps happening. You lose interest, or you lose sleep, or you lose the sense that you're actually living your own life. And you blame yourself, because that's the only story you were given for what this failure could mean. Here's what almost no one says out loud, and it took me a long time to see it clearly. Mastery of one thing isn't the same as wholeness of self. And confusing the two costs people entire decades. For a mind built for width, forcing depth in only one place is a way of becoming smaller than you were designed to be. That grief you feel at the top of a specialist ladder is your intelligence trying to tell you something. It's trying to tell you that you climbed the wrong tree, and it's not too late to climb down. The seventh sign is the one most people notice last, because it takes years to see clearly and honestly. You are quietly building a strange kind of intelligence that only reveals itself fully in your 30s or 40s. It shows up in the way you solve problems that break other people, and you don't even realize you're doing it. It shows up in how you can walk into a room, feel what's missing, and know it because of something you studied years ago that touched the same nerve in a completely different field for a different reason. It shows up in how people slowly start to describe you as hard to categorize, and how you start to hear that as a compliment. This is the polymath returning. It's not a personality type. It's a slow ripening that happens on its own timeline. Every abandoned hobby, every course you didn't finish, every book you underlined and put down half-read, they were all part of a long, patient construction of a mind that finally becomes useful when the world gets complicated. It's complicated enough to need it. And here's the strange thing about the moment we're living in right now. The world just got complicated enough. But here's what nobody tells you. And this is the part that changes everything if you let it land. The world isn't slow because you're too fast. The world is finally starting to shape itself like your mind. For most of history, the reward went to the specialist because society was stable enough to make deep expertise pay off. That world is quietly ending, and the transition is happening faster than most institutions have been able to admit. The problems that matter now don't sit inside one discipline. They sit in the seams between disciplines, in the overlap. Climate, technology ethics, mental health at scale, the entanglement of AI with everyday life and identity. None of them fit inside a single field. None of them can be solved by depth alone, no matter how deep. And the people who can move through those seams, who can carry the shape of biology into a design meeting, or the shape of literature into a technology decision, those are the people who become genuinely necessary. Not just employable, necessary. There's a difference, and you're about to start feeling it in the world around you. You spent years feeling like the shape of your mind was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was early, and the loneliness you felt while waiting for the world to catch up is a specific kind of loneliness only a wide mind knows. That loneliness is almost over. You don't need to fix yourself. You just need to stop apologizing for the shape you already are, quietly and completely. Ask yourself what you're currently forcing depth on, because someone told you that's what real focus is supposed to look like. Notice when you edit yourself down in a conversation, and try, gently, to leave one extra piece of yourself on the table. Give yourself permission to rotate seasons. One span of months focused on one thing, then another after that. And trust that the connections between them will form later, without your effort, in ways you can't yet see or plan for. Build a small, quiet place to hold what you learned. It doesn't have to be a system. A notebook is enough, honestly. Because 3 years from now, when you're working on something completely new, the past will come back to help you. That's how a wide mind works. It doesn't waste. It just delays the payoff and asks you to trust it while you wait. You aren't behind. You aren't broken. You aren't a person who couldn't choose. You are a person who chose everything. Chose everything quietly, over years, in small returns and small departures. And no one told you that was allowed. The world spent a long time asking you to be smaller than you were designed to be. And you almost believed it. That time is ending. The seams between fields are where the future gets built. And that's where you've been standing. You've been standing in those seams your whole life, waiting for the world to notice that you belong there. So pick something for this season. Just one thing. Give it your focus, and give the rest of you permission to wait. Then let the wide-angle mind you were born with do what it's always done, quietly and without asking permission. Connect, translate, notice, weave. That's the whole practice. That's the whole shape of the life waiting for you. Which of these signs felt the most like you? I'd love to know.